So welcome back, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the first session. And I wanted to just comment on a couple of the items that Vice Provost Fan raised on the session with Derek Lee. The whole idea on education about the role of access with technology. That technology, the classic term is better, cheaper, faster. And seeing the benefits of the Swirl AI solution in this better, cheaper, faster that democratizes the availability of education. It also creates more customization in terms of experience. I thought that was a great point. And the second one is this idea about versatility that, again, Vice Provost Fan raised. As Derek talked about their platform, the ability of using that platform to expand successfully to different age groups, to different subject matters, to different geographies, seeing that idea in technology where it becomes a platform for expansion into other areas. Sounds similar to Google as they kind of connect the world's data and the world's information. So a big thank you to both of them for a fascinating session. Now, our second session here is going to be focused on how the Greater China region is driving innovation in global services. And we're very fortunate to have Elinor Leung, who's going to be with us to share her perspectives on how innovation is really advancing internet services, not just in the Greater China region, but actually abroad and globally. Elinor is the head of Asia Telecom and Internet Research at CLSA. CLSA is headquartered in Hong Kong and provides capital market and investment services to global corporate and institutional clients. Elinor joined CLSA's Telecom and Internet Group in 2002. She was promoted to her current role in 2009. Prior to that, she worked for the private equity fund CDP Capital. She has a CFA, a CPA, holds an MBA and a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Cornell and a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from the University of Hong Kong. In this discussion, Elinor is going to share her views about the region's most promising areas of innovation currently and post-COVID by product, by sector, and by service. We'll ask Elinor to share the unique attributes of consumers in the region, how they differ from other markets, and how this might impact commercial opportunities. And finally, we're going to hear her views about longer term, where are the types of winners going to come from in internet services? Are they going to be larger tech companies? Are they going to be smaller entrepreneurial ventures? And what are some of the trends coming out of COVID-19? Now, in terms of the format, like always, we'll reserve time at the end of my fireside chat with Elinor for audience Q&A. You can just go to the Slido tool that's embedded at the bottom of your screen. And again, you can either enter in your own question or upvote one of the existing ones. So let me now formally welcome Elinor. And Elinor, it's great to have you with us.
Hi.
And Elinor, let me start out. And this is the third year that we've had you with us. And so we're obviously feeling very, very fortunate about that. Tell us about your leadership journey, if you would, because you've got fascinating views and forecasts that have been very, very accurate. And it'd be fascinating just to hear a little bit about how you got to where you got to.
Right. Well, first of all, good afternoon or evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having me to join your conference again this year's. I actually start off with the internet bubble. I actually start with the telecom bubble. When I was in my private equity firm, we are focusing on investing in the telecom space, which is at that time is talking about 3G. If you still remember, is that all the corporate, including Hutchison in Hong Kong, is crazy about the 3G license. They pay hefty licensing fee to get that spectrums. At that time, I was involving in all these projects and bidding for the telecom operators around the world. And that is a very exciting period of time. Of course, a lot of things run a little bit ahead of itself. So 3G is not entirely designed for data. It actually only handles very little data. But we do see the data era blossom with 4G, with 5G, and now we are really getting into another era, which is the IoT era. So I actually grow with these evolutions. So I start with the telecom boom, and then I start expanding into the internet space. I wasn't participating in the Tencent IPO, but I was covering them in a very early stage. At that time, Tencent is just selling arbitrage, and Baidu is just a pure search engine. I look at this company, how they evolve into the internet giant today. They are expanding now from, like Tencent, expanding from entertainment to e-commerce, to fintech, to healthcare services across a broad range of the services now. I was part of the IPO of Alibaba's, and so we also look at how these companies evolve to become a really great internet giants right now. China in the past, we are always following the US footsteps. At the time of Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba IPO, we always say, hey, this is the Facebook of China, this is the Google of China, this is the Amazon of China. But however, right now, I think China is basically as the technology forefront on par with the US companies. So whenever we talk about fintech today, we always talk about Ali and then the rest of the world. So it's no longer is like the US version of China. We are ahead of a lot of the new services in China, because China has a big market with 1.3 billion population. If you think about China, is that everything offline is so backward. We don't have anything offline. On the other hand, is that it makes the online is very interesting, and user is highly receptive to the new services because they don't have to give up any old habits. So the receptive rate in China is very high. I think Chinese government is also right in one thing, is that building infrastructure. So when they build the manufacturing ecosystem in China, they build roads, they build offline infrastructures. Although they overbuild it, they overspend it, but it does help to build up the factories in China. So when they build the internet era, they spend tons of money in the telcos. We can go over that, how they invest in that. But they also build a fantastic telecom infrastructure, 3G, 5G, in order to support the internet or technology evolution in China. So I'm very lucky to be able to see all these Chinese internet companies to grow over time.
Yep, a fascinating review, and we're going to go into a variety of these areas. Let me just ask you, when you mentioned that a variety of the Chinese technology companies are moving cross-sector, they may be consumer businesses moving enterprise or enterprise consumer. Say a bit more about why that's happening, because the US, you generally see more verticalized companies in a specific domain. You see a little bit less of the moving cross-boundary. How and why is that happening there?
I think there's about two things. One is on the cost side, because acquiring a customer is extremely important. Actually, it's the biggest cost for any of the internet platforms. So in order to get the maximum return from the user, you try to sell them everything to the users, from entertainment to food to clothes, electronic product, financial services. So you want to satisfy all the needs of the consumers, and that will help you to maximize your returns. And so as a result is that you are able to that's why everybody is expanding horizontally in China, from one vertical to the other verticals. User data also help in terms of the expansion. The other thing that I think that help is the government. If you look at the internet company in China, they get all sorts of license. They have the e-commerce license, fintech license. If you look at Tencent, Ali, they got all sorts of financial license. Also, although the government want them to under more control right now, just like the financial company, but they do a payment license, a wealth management product license, insurance license, all sorts of license, they're able to get that. So part of that is also because of the support of the government is all the relaxed regulation in the past of the government to help them to be able to grow so big in China.
Excellent, excellent. And as you look across all the areas of potential innovation related to AI, getting into e-commerce, autonomous vehicles, fifth generation networks, which areas of innovation are you most excited about?
I'm technology background. I'm excited with all type of technology evolving. But one thing is that everything has to start with 5G. You don't have 5G, a lot of things you can't really do on the back of that. So if I may, I start with the 5G is that China is 8 years behind the world in terms of rolling out the 3G, 4 years behind the world in terms of rolling out 4G, but China wants to be ahead of the world in terms of rolling out 5Gs. So as you know that the telco already rolled 600,000 5G base station last year in China. They will roll another 600,000 5G base station this year, another 600,000 next year. They pretty much cover China after 3 years investments. But the interesting is that if you talk to a lot of the investor regarding 5G, they talk about millimeter wavelength, that talk about high frequency band. But in China, they're using low frequency band to roll out the 5G. China Mobile is using 2.6 gigahertz, which is the same as 4G. And China Telecom Unicom using 3.5 gigahertz. But what's interesting is that in 2021, they're even using lower frequency band. So China Mobile is trying to cover 5G with 700 megahertz spectrum because they're as you know that the TV spectrum has changed from analog to digital. The spectrum that left behind is going to use up to roll out 5G. And the other one is that China Unicom, China Telecom, they also reformed their 3G spectrums and use it 2.1 gigahertz to use it for 5G, which means is that the 5G coverage in China can be deeper and broader. In China, the government also encouraged sharing. So we have 2 5G network in the city, and now they're trying to encourage maybe 1 network in the rural areas, so to share the network. So that saves costs, but we have good spectrum, good coverage in China as well. And the other thing is that when China roll out 5G, they are not roll out non-standalone 5G. Starting from late last year, all the network is starting on standalone 5G network. The difference there is that non-standalone 5G network is just an overlay on 4G. It just get a bigger bandwidth, so faster download speed, that's it. But for real 5G, the standalone one, you also get shorter latency, 1 millisecond, which is 1/10 of 4G, as well as you can support 100,000 millions IoT per kilometers, and so you can support more IoT. So that is the real 5G networks. And why we need 5G is because 4G, 3G, 4G is completely changed the consumer behavior. As you know, with iPhone, we have the apps that's completely changed the consumer all the behaviors. And 5G is going to completely change the enterprise behavior. So with the 5G come, you're going to see a big revolutions in the industry in China, from manufacturing industries to auto industry. They are all going to change because of 5G. That's talking about automations, that talk about financing system, blockchain, they all support all these. Of course, 5G also benefit consumers. We just recently do a test in China is that the early beneficiary of 5G is entertainment, especially game. If you download a game on 5G, which take 83% less time, like Honor King. If you download a Bilibili video, which take half of the time, which means that the game experience is going to be, game will be the biggest beneficiary or early beneficiary of 5G. And this hasn't talking about cloud gaming, lower revenue sharing over times. So that is going to be early beneficiary, but longer term is the industrial that is going to benefit more. So that is going to be the next biggest change for China is on the industrial side.
Yep. And let me ask you on this, Elinor, this idea of pace of change. Like you mentioned, in 3G, China was 8 years behind the US, and 4G, it was only 4 years behind, and now 5G, it's ahead. What do you attribute that pace of advance to? Is it related to government investment? Is it revolving willingness to pay? Is it something else?
Actually, telecom output in China is very low. It's only 50 RMB per user, which is, you can imagine, is not a lot. So it's the supportive of the government. So if you look at globally, the telecom industry landscape, competitive landscape is too extreme. China is probably on one extreme, which is relatively consolidated. We only have 3 operators, and India is the another extreme of the spectrum. They have regional operators. They have over 10 telecom operators there. It turns out that the concentrated industry is more viable. But it's better because telecom is about scale. You need a nationwide coverage, no matter you have 20% of the users of population as your users or 60% of the population as your user. It's about scale. So because they only have 3 telcos, so China Mobile will be able to get sufficient scale, 60% of the market, in order to spend heavily in capex. So their capex is about 200 billion RMB per year. That to help the government to build out a fantastic network in China. I think the government have to balance, do you charge spectrum to increase revenue for the government, or you give them free and let them build the infrastructure to help the society or help the economy? And the Chinese government is leaning towards the latter, is that the spectrum in China is 0. You don't have to pay anything for the spectrum. As a result of that, China Mobile can reuse the money to put it into the network to build a fantastic network in China and help the economy in return. So I think that's one of the smart things which China did in the past, is to keep the industry relatively concentrated, allow the telco to have some sort of scale, be profitable, and not charge the spectrum. As a result of that, they're able to reinvest in the network. So as a result of that, but it could only be able to do in China is because sometimes when you have this dominant position, you will raise prices in the market. But in China, as you know, it's planned economy. So the telco always under the pressure of the government to cut prices. So you don't have that kind of monopolistic behavior in China. So it's kind of unique cases in China. But anyway, is that the telco has make a lot of money from the business, so they're able to reinvest in the technology.
Yeah. Do you see a similar story in AI and AI capabilities? So we talked a bit yesterday. We had Kai-Fu Lee and we had Zhongmin Song at McKinsey, et cetera. And some people say the US is still ahead of China on AI, but the rate of adoption, rate of change is greater in China. Some people have implied China's actually already eclipsed the US. What is your view on AI and the relative position and capabilities?
Right. AI is an interesting thing. AI is not a thing. AI is a technology. You apply in AI in all sorts of things. Your AI is empowering your search algorithm. Your AI is empowering your recommendation. Your AI is empowering a lot of things. So everything will be involved in AI. Everything is AI in the future. So at the end of the day, I think the adoption of AI is quite high in China, but in certain areas, China can ahead of the world, which is something about consumer-related services. China is, or application-related services, China is always ahead of the world. But for some other things, China may be a little bit behind of the world, like healthcare, medicine, those stuff. I think the US is still pretty advanced in terms of using AI in those technologies. Autonomous driving, for example, I think Waymo is still ahead of China because they are a few years ahead of China to start the project. So I think which AI is ahead or which AI is not ahead is depends on which industry that we are talking about. But China do have the fundamental raw requirement elements to have the AI to advance fast in China, like data. We have a lot of data to train the AI, and user is very receptive to AI, so allow the AI to grow faster compared to the rest of the world. So I think the potential is there. In general, I think certain things China is still behind the world.
Yeah. Good. And let me ask you now, if we drill down on some of the luminary Chinese technology companies, so Tencent, Alibaba, Meituan, what is your view on those large tech companies in terms of where they're going to continue to grow, and where do you think and how do you think they'll grow? Will it be organic growth? Will it be acquisitions? Will it be different geographies? Say a bit about the big Chinese tech companies?
Unfortunately, the internet giant do have an edge in terms of growing bigger and bigger. In my view, is that it doesn't make sense to how to spread them out, because a lot of the stuff is fully integrated. The data is shared across different services. I disagree with the practice of disintegrating them, meaning spin them off. If you look at in each individual company, we will just expect them to expand their ecosystem bigger and bigger. Like Tencent, when they first started, it's just a QQ, IM, instant messaging services, selling avatars, and then they expand into game. Now they're the largest game company in the world in terms of development, publishing, as well as distribution. And it's not just China. It's in the rest of the world as well. They're in the future. The overseas game revenue for Tencent is going to be as big as their China revenue. Now it's 20%. So there's plenty of room for them to grow. And China is ahead of the world in terms of mobile games because we don't have PC connection that well. We only have 60% of the population of PC connection. The rest is 100%. So PC doesn't really work that well. So they're ahead in terms of mobile game. And now recently, over the last few years, and of course, they're very dominant in video, music, those, I think everybody know about that. But recently, they have built a fantastic mini program ecosystem that will help them to bring them into the 2B opportunity with the mini program ecosystem. So I mentioned that 5G, the first early changes is game industries have substantial changes because of 5G. And the second thing of the biggest early changes with 5G is mini program. So if you remember is that with the 3G, 4G come, iPhone fantastic developed the app store and people can download the app and use it. But that is not very efficient for most of the company because to ask people to download an app is very expensive. Only that super app, high frequency use app, it can be downloaded. That means that like Lululemon or Nike, they generate 30% of their sales in the US through their own website, through their own application. In China, they can't do that because no one uses PC, and the mini program to ask people to download native is super expensive. They have to rely on like Ali or Tencent to distribute their contents or their products. But when 5G comes, things change. We're going back to the cloud-based, web-based idea, meaning that you no longer need to download the app. You can call upon it whenever you want. It's like the website, it's like the PC world. Because if you don't need to download it, consumer is more willing to use or try out the low frequency applications or low frequency services, content, because they just need to call upon it anytime they want, just like the PC era. What it means that all the enterprises, they will be able to have their own mini program, their own app, their own website to promote themselves. And that will be creating a great opportunity. And that will also be a great opportunity for Tencent to break in. So on Tencent, they already have millions of mini programs on the platform, which including online store, online services, offline services, government services, and that create ecosystem for Tencent to get into the business world, the e-commerce world. So their transaction last year is 1.6 trillion, double year on year. And the mini program DAU is 400 million already. So it's very successful for them. And the potential for mini program, one is cloud. So all these mini programs will be using their cloud softwares, as well as advertising revenue, payment revenue, financing revenue. So they open up a lot of to-be opportunity to support the merchants in the long run. So all the others, of course, fintech is another big opportunity for Tencent in the whole scheme.
Excellent. And is it fair to say, though, that you see more growth opportunity by some of the big Chinese tech companies like Tencent expanding abroad than doing the multi-sectored approach within China?
Right. So in China, you need to go into 2B right now because the consumer internet is relatively mature. So you have to expand to 2B opportunity. They also try to go international. It's not easy because a lot of the business already dominated by especially US firm on a global basis because they have a first early mover advantage there. But few things China still be able to break through, especially the new stuff. For example, mobile game. If you look at the top 10 mobile game in the US, there's a couple of them in China. It's not necessarily Tencent. There's a company called Lilith. They have a couple of good mobile games. Is on the top 10 mobile game chart in the US. So the mobile game in US is not that popular because a lot of them are very sophisticated gamers. They like console game still, which is true. But with the mobile network getting more sophisticated, technology getting more sophisticated, the mobile game can be as sophisticated as the PC game. We still see the same migration trend from PC to mobile. So game is easy and less political sensitive. So that would be easy for the Chinese company to go global. Huawei actually is the first successful global expansion, but now, it's no longer there. Payment is another, but payment is a little bit tricky. Payment, there's a lot of regulations requirement there. So what payment can do is just you work with local guy, like Alipay works with Kakao Pay, they work with Paytm, they work with Ascend in Malaysia. That is the local guy. You have to work with the local guys. But once you maybe invest in 20% stake, a minority stake in these overseas wallets, you're able to have a closer collaborations with these. So Alipay already have 10 wallets around the world. And the next thing they're going to do is allow the wallet to be used cross-border. So Kakao Pay can be used in China, or China Alipay can be used in Korea, that kind of cross-border usage. And the next one, of course, is cross-border money transmissions, and then other financial services is going to follow. So for payment side, fintech side, the stuff they can only use is on a cooperation strategy.
Yep. And let me ask you, Elinor, you've mentioned in several places here about the importance of scale. And you in fact, a few minutes ago, you said, disintegrating companies is not helpful because there's increasing returns to scale. What is your view on the broad antitrust landscape? Certainly we've seen it here in the US where there's a variety of investigations going on with Google, with Amazon, et cetera. China's had some as well. What is your view? Do you feel that those are misplaced initiatives to kind of break up companies and challenge them?
I think the antitrust trend is for real. I mean, it's necessary because these companies just getting more and more powerful. You need some regulation to regulate them. What I'm saying is that spinning them off is not going to help. In terms of the technology advancement, in terms of innovation, it's not going to help. Without the scale, it can't grow as fast. But you have to regulate them because they cannot use their monopolistic power in order to hurt the merchants, to hurt the consumer as well. So I think antitrust regulation is just going to go up instead of go down, or more investigation in the future instead of less investigation in the future. But unfortunately, it's not an easy thing to do. China may be relatively easier because the government is very powerful, and you can see what happened in China. But for the rest of the world, it's a little more difficult task. But we have to do it, and people will have to find a way of doing it. We will see how that is going to be evolved. If you look, but unfortunately, the toughest part in terms of antitrust is that the main monopoly for the internet giant is not the businesses, it's the user data. So if you really want to break the monopoly situation, you have to share data. But how do you share data? It's impossible to share data because the data piracy is impossible to share the raw data in the world. So that has become a big subject for all global government. If you don't force them to share data, it's very difficult to break the monopoly status there. But no one have the answer for that. I would use China example because you hear a lot of data sharing used in China right now. One is that I think the news is a little bit misrepresent. The data sharing that China talked about is more credit related data sharing. is more for the credit side. It's not for like all platforms have to share their data. And as you know, that all the banks already have to share the data with the government regarding who has borrowed how much money on a platform, what's their identity there. And in China, I think the first thing they're going to do is ask the online lenders to share the information, which platform you have lent how much money, who you are, and submit to the government. But for all the other data to be shared, it's difficult because if you think about Tencent, when they do a credit rating risk management system, and they will see your social connection. For example, if I am an employee of a company, I will in the social group there. And Tencent will know that you're under that company. When you left that social group, it could mean that you already left the company. If you haven't joined another social group, enterprise social group, you may be in between work. Your repayment capability is going to be reduced. But this social group information, it can't be shared with the central government or for anyone. So what the government can ask for is that they can only set certain parameter to ask for data, a very standard one, like transaction data or whatever data. But even the transaction data, if you ask Alipay, Tencent Pay to provide the transaction data, how about credit card? Do they need to provide the transaction data? Actually, Visa, MasterCard doesn't know your transaction. So how do they share the data? The bank has to share the data. So it's getting very tricky when you get into data sharing. There's a lot of data piracy involved, concern over there. So it's not going to be happen, I would say, but the lending history, I think that will be the first one that could be shared in the industry. And the other thing is that if you just share the matrix, it's not effective because Tencent, WeChat, and QQ doesn't share data. They just share text, and their recommendation is inferior compared to the Alibaba, which consolidate all the users' data under unified ID. They know what you eat last night, what you buy yesterday, what you watch. That's why the recommendation is better there. So it's a tough topic.
Yeah, if there's notable benefit in data, which makes sense in the scale and the quality of data, what happens when you look across the globe at smaller markets, smaller nations, individual European nations, Latin American nations, even Singapore, et cetera? What happens to those countries in terms of being suppliers of technology, in terms of being creators of impressive technology companies? Is it going to be difficult for smaller nations with smaller size data samples to win?
I think internet is a tough business in country like Hong Kong. We already 7 million people. I think the same reason for like European country, why they don't have an internet giant over there on a global scale basis in each country they may have, is because of the size problems. Because no one wants to spend a lot of money to create a website for Hong Kong. Of course, you go for the biggest market in the world. So I think it's going to be tough in these smaller size country. But I still see the technology will come out in these companies, but for the technology to grow big, to be more broadly adopted, you may still have to work directly with these internet giants to get scale for these technology. So they're always saying that you have the best AI is worth nothing if you're not working with Google or Amazon or Facebook. Interesting.
One other question on that. Where do you see India going? I mean, large domestic market also, good GDP growth, et cetera. Do you see more technology companies in India, or it's going to be a while before you see the type of activities you'd see in China or even the US?
India actually has a lot of internet company, but the infrastructure in India is not as good as China. For example, take e-commerce as an example, is that China is the factory of the world, so they have all the sort of product that you want, but India is not focusing on manufacturing, they're focusing on technology to start with. So product supply is one thing that is lagging. And second is that they operate on a regional basis. So when you go from one region to another region, you have to pay some sort of custom tax. That's very complicated. And third is that the road is not that well built. So it's very difficult to deliver your goods across cities. So there's a lot of hurdles there. And Consumer spending power is also lower in India versus China. And so that's also create another barrier. So I would say is that there's a huge potential there because there's a lot of population there, but the country's infrastructure is not right yet in order to have the same type of internet boom as China. If you look at the China internet company, the next country they focusing on to go to is ASEAN. So I think that could be interesting in terms of picking up companies in ASEAN, because those many years is similar to China many years ago. There's no regulation, the market is still young, the smartphone penetration is low, there's kind of growth there. But of course, the competition is tougher there because there's a lot of international players there. But I think ASEAN is going to be the next interesting space for internet.
Excellent. Let me ask you one other question, then I want to go to the audience questions, and that is your view about what could be a new normal coming out of COVID. Do you see a new normal in terms of working from home, e-commerce at a notably accelerated rate, telehealth solutions? Do you view that, in essence, we will never go back to our commercial lives pre-COVID? We'll never go back to that because people are kind of tasted the digital fruit here?
Right. If you think about first SaaS, which is in 2003, we are migrating physical goods online. We have explosive e-commerce growth after that. And then in the second SaaS, which is last year, 2020, we are migrating service online. So the next phase, what the biggest impact for COVID-2 is that you see that live stream exploding. Live stream is exploding is because we are moving the services. Live stream is just not e-commerce. So after e-commerce, you move the goods, live stream move the salespeople online. So instead of going to the store, you talk to the salespeople, you get a recommendation from the salespeople, you do it online. And the live stream is also help you with telehealth and also help you with finance. So Alipay, WeChat Pay already give you the financial advisory online. Of course, that will also involve in AI advisory there as well. But I think the key changes for COVID this time is the service industry. You will see completely different migration going for online education is because of live stream. And actually that bodes well with 5G coming because 5G is not just give you more capacity, faster download speed, but the key thing is that the data rate for 5G is 1/10 of 4G. So your download speed is 10 times, but your data rate is 1/10. So forget about Wi-Fi. You don't want Wi-Fi anymore. You migrate to 5G. You use 5G across the board. If you look at all the 5G packages, 100 gig data per month. Yeah. So I think that is the service industry is going to have the biggest change post-COVID.
Excellent. Let me take questions now. We've got quite a few questions about 5G. So let me ask you some of them here. Say a bit more about the industry or enterprise innovations that are going to be driven by 5G. Give us some more examples as one of the questions.
Right. I know you're asking about industry, but I think the first
enterprise, maybe enterprise.
Yeah, enterprise industries. But I think the first thing you're going to, I always like to give you the gaming example because that is easy to understand. If you look at gaming, cloud gaming is that it's like Netflix. If you think about console game today, you have to download game, wait for long hours before the game download and you played it. The user experience is so inferior. But you think about Netflix is that you click on it, you immediately continue your last action. Doesn't matter if it's PC or iPad or your smartphone. So cloud game is going to give you the same experience. But the key thing is not just that, is because if all your game is running in the cloud, meaning your infrastructure can be a lot more superior. Your game development no longer limited by your console, which already powerful, but is no longer restricted by your console. You can use multiple CPU, GPU. Google can give you the technology. You can use AI. You can use AR technology in order to develop your game. So your game is going to be a lot more immersive, a lot more powerful. And as you know, that game can be applied in all sorts of industry, in travel, in education. That is going to spread out to other stuff as well. No 5G, no AR, no technology improvement. That's why I always start with 5G there. So that is a very clear example, is that when your stuff can run in the cloud, you can do a lot more stuff. And the other big industry, more obvious to us, is the automated, self-driving car. So that is going to be another big changes, is that autonomous driving, because right now the car is already on the road. It's work. It's just there's still two hurdles there. The two hurdle one is cost. Because autonomous driving car, the cost is double of a normal taxi, and you need a human being sit behind the wheel. It's very expensive if you think about that compared to a normal taxi. That's why it cannot go to mass adoption. You need the technology cost to come down, which already been falling, and the regulation to change. You don't need a human being to sit behind the wheel. Baidu already suggests that we have a person sitting in the cloud, which is the central control room, who can control multiple cars, instead of one car, to reduce the cost of the human being. So I would say that taxi, bus, public transportation, it makes total sense to have autonomous driving car there. And for private, and depends on your preference, you can have all those services as well. But auto industry is going to be big changes there. And when you go to there, what it means is that all your data recording the car is going to be collected over the cloud, and they can feed back to the automakers, and the automaker can monitor the performance of the car even after the sale. And so they will be able to enable them to better design their future car, and able to them to provide better after-sale service to the consumer in the future. So they know immediately that your car has a problems there. So that will completely change the auto industry development in the future. Auto industry manufacturing could be like smartphone in the future. So you just buy some sort of software from Google or Baidu, and then you buy some hardware and compose it together and have your own car. The process is getting simpler and simpler. As a result of that, Xiaomi is getting into space. They just already saying that they're going to produce car themselves. So auto industry is going to be another big changes. Is more easy to understand. And the other is like manufacturing, everything is automated. You don't need that many labor force in the warehouses, or deliver your goods, or even Waimai, you can use autonomous delivery instead of human to deliver to you. That save a lot of labor costs. Surveillance is another, it's very helpful in terms of agriculture. So you can monitor the weather conditions, the crop growing process, progress. It can do some sort of prevention and increase your yield. It applies to every single industry, basically. Of course, some of these enterprise applications will take longer time to develop compared to consumer enterprises. But as long as the technology is there, infrastructure is there, I would see the adoption rate will be fast.
Excellent. Several questions on millimeter wave deployment with 5G. So similar to what we would see here in the US, where Verizon is deploying millimeter wave 5G, which has got lower path lengths, but very high bandwidth. Do you see that happening in China that would really kind of tap low latency applications?
So if you look at the China, is that we haven't issued the millimeter wavelength bandwidth in China. They're still investigating that. We don't have an application which must have millimeter wavelength spectrums, because as you say, it's more for capacity. So if the capacity is big enough at 3.5 gigahertz or the other spectrums, then we don't need to go to millimeter wavelength spectrums. And also 5G, you don't need to cover across the country. For example, industrial application, you just need the Wi-Fi network in that industrial area or the factory. You don't have to have a continuous coverage across China. So those, even if you apply the millimeter wavelength technology, that could be a smaller area in terms of broad area. My understanding for the US, I'm not sure I'm right, is that you don't have enough 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, which is the standard spectrum used globally for 5G, and that's why you go higher. I think it's just a spectrum issue in the US. It's not like they prefer millimeter wavelength rather than the others. But that could be at one point of time that we may have to go to millimeter wavelength in order to capture that kind of capacity requirement.
Good. Let me ask you the last question here before we do a wrap up. And it's an interesting kind of cross-border question. So one direction in the set of questions is, what type of businesses from abroad could enter China most successfully? What type of businesses would it be that a US company, a European company could enter China? And then vice versa. Is it going to be difficult for Chinese companies, especially if you take WeChat as an example, kind of a super app, that model is so different than in other markets, which tend to be more verticalized? Do you see a lot of these cross-boundary opportunities separate from gaming that you referenced earlier?
I think going into China is difficult because China is more trying to cultivate their own not exactly internet giant, but enterprise giant. China doesn't have a lot of big companies. They don't have big SOEs, which is not super operational efficient. So they want to nurture more private big company in China. So they're very protective of the industry, and it's kind of difficult to get there. But even with put the government support aside, is that for international company go to China is difficult. Because the market is very complicated. There's no black and white rule. It's always in a gray area. Like Alibaba do a lot of stuff which is basically out of the boundary, because in the past we do have the regulations there, but people push the boundary. If the government doesn't really respond and they will continue to do it, that's why they can grow a lot faster compared to foreign company. And foreign company always play by the book. If you follow the regulation, there's a lot of stuff you can't do in China. You can't do in China, you can't grow. So the Chinese companies always push the boundary until the government push back. They say, sorry, I did it wrong in the past. I rectify and move on. But by that time, they're already a lot bigger compared to the others. So in order to, even Alibaba now is penalized by 18.2 billion RMB. It's still the biggest e-commerce platform in China. It's not really hurting their dominant position in China. So I think it's tough. The overall environment is quite tough. And don't underestimate Chinese consumer. They're extremely demanding, like 7-day goods return, no question. They want fast delivery. They're basically spoiled. You need to give them tons of content. The clean website of Google doesn't work in China. They want full of contents there. So there's a lot of operational challenges in China apart from the regulation side. So it's difficult in getting there. And the funny thing is that the area that the foreign firm dominate is advertising. The big four advertising companies in China, they're leading the space because in the past, the government doesn't think advertising is important. As you understand, Communist Party, right? They don't think that advertising is important, and that's why the big 4A firm is there. That's the only area we can see the foreign firm can go in very successfully. But for all the others, I would say it's tough. Same thing is that for China, but outside of China is tough. Put the political concern aside, is that they are behind. They don't have the first move advantage. Google is already around the world. Facebook is already around the world, and try to break through them is difficult. And I don't see the other country is as accommodative as the Chinese company, give you all sort of environment license to do the business that you want. So they don't have the same internet giant as Tencent or Ali. Or the other way you can say that US has plenty of big companies, so it could be more diversified or more fragmented market there. But in China, we don't have any big software company. So as a result, that Tencent is the one doing CRM, and Ali Cloud is the one doing the CRM, because there's no big CRM company in China. So when there's no big company there, they do it themselves. They become the biggest in that segment. This is also why they can be big across so many areas.
Yeah, fascinating, just fascinating. Elinor, let me do this. I want to summarize some of the key takeaways that I got from our very interesting conversation and give you a chance to upgrade them or share any parting comments that you've got. So the first concept that I think was just a fascinating one is, for many people, this kind of view that China was following the US in many cases, many, many years, but now it's reversing in many cases where China is kind of moving into the lead in a variety of areas. And you've talked about 5G and payments and other solutions. You also made a special emphasis on 5G itself as an enabler. Not just kind of large domestic market, not just, willingness to share data, but that you need that core high-speed mobile network that creates a platform for a lot of other innovation. And that will change, kind of the world and the industry as we know it. A third major point I got is that you made this comment that everything in the future will be AI. And so kind of these distinctions that you have separate AI companies with their innovations and then other companies is going to go away and things are going to become all AI, and raises some interesting issues about how do you get access to data? Is there an advantage to being big, et cetera? The next comment I thought you made that was really interesting was on antitrust. That you basically said, yeah, this is worrisome that all these companies globally are getting very, very big, but it's very hard to call out what action you would take without creating a subscale business that potentially is subscale to the consumer, i.e. higher cost, less relevance, et cetera. So this antitrust issue is going to be a bit perplexing. It may be kind of populist or political in nature, but from a technology standpoint, it's hard to kind of see where you take that. Another point is this argument about the geographies in the world and how difficult it may be for, number one, Chinese companies to enter the US. We have large established technology companies. The opposite occurring, where it may be difficult for US companies to enter China, that's going to be a fairly difficult play, and people are kind of staking their turf. And once you've got a position, you've got a first mover advantage in a world of data and AI. You've got kind of that first mover advantage. And then the last item, which I thought was interesting, is autonomous vehicles. We tend to look at it in a narrow way, like it's my own personal car and do I like it, not having to drive it. You're basically saying that is going to affect a whole broad array of sectors, delivery of products and public transportation, a variety of areas. Once the technology cost goes down and once you eliminate the human labor component of managing it, but that keep your eye on autonomous vehicles of all types. Let me stop on that. Did I miss anything? Anything you would upgrade or any parting comments?
I think you summarized very well with those conclusions. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Excellent. Elinor, let me just say once again, a huge thank you. We've had you, as I mentioned, each of 3 years. Every year I learn a huge amount. And, you're obviously following an area that changes rapidly. It changes in product and technology and geographies and regulatory landscape, all of it. And I just continue to be very impressed with how current and insightful about the future you are. So a big thank you. And I hope we can have you come back to UCLA very, very soon.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. See you.
Thank you. And let me just say to everybody that we're going to wrap up our second day here, and we're going to take a 1-day break. So we have tomorrow, which Wednesday evening Pacific time will be off, and then we'll come back for Thursday and Friday. So for Thursday, which is going to be our next session, Thursday evening at Pacific time, we're going to be covering 2 areas. One is Foxconn's transformation, and the second one is technology-based transformations in healthcare. Both of these are oriented around high-tech manufacturing. So we're going to have Jacob Chen, who's the vice chair of Hunhai Foxconn Technology Group and founding president of Foxconn University. And then we're going to get a whole review on mmWave, which is a very interesting medical device company that is merging hardware and data together. We're going to have the group vice president of mmWave with us and also the global marketing director with us. So a big thank you again tonight to our speakers, to our moderators. For all of those of you that are in the US, have a great evening. For those of you in Asia, have a great day. And again, we'll look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Take care. Thank you.